Great. Thanks. And we are so excited to have Pat Farenga here today. And I'm just going to do that quick introduction again, Pat. He's the publisher of Growing Without Schooling. He is continuing the legacy of John Holt, and he's the author of Grow Your Teach Your Own. And I don't know the last things after because it's changed a couple times. I have, I think, the second edition, if not the first. And I know because the other one was red and this one's pink, this one's orange. There was another one too, but I couldn't find that one. But we're really thrilled to have him here. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Pat. We've got a long list of questions that people submitted before, and then I'm sure there'll be some more today too.
Great, great. Well, fire away.
Okay, I'm going to go back to my list here. It says, the first one I think is a pretty big one. And it says, I'd like to know where Pat sees the future of homeschooling in the next 20, 50, and 100 years. Woo, that goes way out there.
Boy, I'll say. Looking at my notes here, I thank you for sending some of these in advance. You know, I don't know if I could divide it into 20, 50, 100 year increments, but I do feel that, you know, homeschooling, I mean, look, it's being banned in Germany. It's been banned in Germany. It's being banned in France. It's not a home run across the world, but I think we're in most English-speaking countries. It's going to, you know, to withstand any legal challenges. But I think that it's going to be slow and steady growth. I mean, the pandemic tripled the number of homeschoolers, but we know that the numbers, I mean, these weren't really homeschoolers. They hadn't registered. These were people just self-identified as homeschoolers. So we don't have any real solid numbers on that, but it did increase. And it just goes to show you that, you know, the society's fragile, you know, and when you have a major problem like the pandemic, we need some agility, and there isn't any in our school system. You know, this is one of the things that is really upset me, you know, as a father and as a citizen and as an unschooler. It's like, why couldn't the schools, especially early in the pandemic, when we knew that, you know, children were less likely to get it and outdoors was safer for them, why not have activities outside that were scheduled, that the school was operating, so parents could count on that? And, you know, and just, you know, take that curriculum and throw it out the window for a time. And then they might even, or even better yet, try an unschooling approach. See, well, maybe they can learn math by playing soccer. I wonder how much math they would learn by playing basketball or something like that, you know, but don't forget social emotional learning. I mean, they're going on and on about the mental toll and emotional toll that this has had on children. But what has been the response? Give them school. Give them school through the computer, make them sit there and do it. This is crazy. You know, we only have, you know, one way of learning in school, and that's sit down, shut up, and do as I say. You know, and that's what John Holt wrote in 1964. You know, in his book How Children Fail. You know, I mean, slowly we're changing, but it changes so slow, and we could see it here. You know, we thought that the pandemic was going to lead to so many different changes in society, and instead we're just reverting back. You know, and you know, I'm afraid that that's also going to be the case with schooling. But there's also like the cost issue, you know, particularly for college. And I do think that we're going to see higher education change. I hope it moves into less than this 4-year income stream for the colleges, and just very, you want to come here to learn computer program, you know, like these hacker schools. You know, you want to learn to do something, we'll teach you how to do it, and then we'll show you how to get a job. You know, instead of like all these general courses that you have to take, and you know, to become a well-rounded individual, as if, you know, you could just point at, you know, at every college student graduate and say, oh yeah, you're a well-rounded individual. My gosh, you know, I mean, we've been living this lie, you know, about like everyone needs to go to college. School is the only way you're going to get a decent job and make a decent living, and that school is the only way you'll learn anything new. Otherwise, you'll just sit on your couch and watch TV all day. And anyone who's worked with children or who has young children, you realize that their questions don't stop, their activity is fairly constant, and their curiosity is huge. Why we don't work, and we've always worked with that naturally. I mean, it's just, parents interacting with their children and stuff, but we don't trust that anymore. We stop trusting. It's like, no, we need an expert. We need to have someone. And I'm going to open this up to as a conversation, but I just wanted to say this because I mentioned it earlier to Monica and Laura. There was a study that came out of pre-K, and this was on NPR, and it's on the NPR.org website, the article, so you could actually read this. It was fascinating. They studied pre-K students, seeing if pre-K education, how effective it is. And they were actually able, I believe the state was Pennsylvania, to have a control group, a random control group, because they had something like 3,000 students from low income who went by lottery into the pre-K program. And so they're able to follow those who didn't get into the program as a control group. And what they found is, lo and behold, after the first year, maybe even the first 2 years, I think, the pre-K group did better in school. They're used to it. But by third grade, they were doing much more poorly. And the lady's name is Dale Farren, Farran, the lead researcher. And her comments were really honest and striking. I said, this just throws everything that I thought. And she's doing a major rethink. And one of the rethinks that she has there is that, the teachers are giving these kids workbooks, phonics worksheets, tracing stuff, because they're impoverished, and so they don't have the enrichment that rich parents do, and blah blah blah. But she realized that the wealthy parents aren't doing this to their kids. When they put kids in pre-K, they're looking for movement, music, art, and play. So why aren't we giving this to the pre-K kids at school? And one of her theories is that it's because the teachers that are trained in pre-K are trained by schools of education that just treat everybody like a student instead of a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. No, you're just a student. And so there's a lot more in that article, particularly about teacher certification too. She brings that issue up, which is something that homeschoolers. Monica. Gosh, when I started work at Holt Associates in 1981, that was a real big thing. Oh, you're not certified to teach, and some people even taken to court. You could read and go without schooling. Many cases. Until that finally got settled, because no study shows that certified makes you a better teacher than an uncertified person in overall. And this is what was shown in the study for pre-K too, which I thought was interesting. So, and another thing, I just want to throw this out. I know that, some of you are beginning or thinking about unschooling. The doubts that you have about doing it. There have been studies that show something like 3/4 of public school teachers have doubts about their abilities and what they're doing. So don't worry. That's part and parcel of working with children. If you're going to be the fountain of all knowledge, this genius, well, you should be teaching at a university and giving lectures to people like that, who want that. And it's a valid way to learn. But to take that lecture, that sit down and listen to me and take notes and we do this to third graders starting in third grade. You start to take notes and stuff. It's like they couldn't learn that when they're 10 or 15 even. We have to start now. The value of play and fantasy, as John wrote in his book How Children Learn. He was noticing this, and now and that was just from his observations. But now we have solid research, some of which is in that article I just said, and much of it has been promoted by Dr. Peter Gray. And then, of course, you've got psychologists like Visconti, I think his name is, Piaget, people like Seymour Papert, who, Mindstorms, talking about computers, but the way to get into them is to get the kids to use them, to manipulate them, to play with them, not to lecture them and say, here's how you code. Let them figure it out. Give them beginning tools. Like there's some coding tools where you just click and drag things to make a program. So there's a lot of ways that children learn besides just going to school, and we need to capitalize on that. So I think in the future, there will be more, and there should be the partnerships. I mean, I really do hope. I mean, John wrote Schools and Homeschoolers, a Fruitful Partnership in 1984 for Phi Delta Kappa magazine. It's on the Holt website. And every now and then I read that and just go, gosh, it's like schools and homeschoolers, yeah, they could be a fruitful partnership, but it's never been considered a partnership. It's always just been, all right, well, if you're not with us, you're against us.
Right. Right.
And it's like, well, wait, fortunately, like, and I write about this in Teacher Own, like my middle daughter, Allison, she was able to take Spanish classes at our local elementary school. Right. But that's, again, like, she could walk to it. So she would walk to the school, sign in at the principal's office, take the class, sign out from the principal's office, and walk home. And that's the advantage of having like small neighborhood community schools. And of course, that's gone now. They've created a huge magnet school that, so Tufts University's bought the old school building right around the corner here. And, so it's, alumni relations or something. And the kids have to take buses to get to the next place, to the next school, So I really think that if there could be some combination of parents, and not a PTA, but how parents and schools can organize to work together, and not feel like it's an all or nothing thing, and alternative schools, agile learning centers, a lot of them, they're showing ways that this can happen. You don't have to be in school all day. And maybe some parents want their kids to be in school all day. All right, if that's the way you want it, you can do that with your children. But I don't want that for my kids, at least not now. I mean, first of all, my girls are 35, 33, and 30. So they're young ladies now. And it just amazes me how, it's always been politicized. Like whenever you try to deal with the schools as a homeschooler, it turns into some sort of issue about, and we even see this now, critical race theory and people trying to, jump in and bomb in on the school boards and stuff. I mean, what's happening is sort of payback, I feel, because the schools have ignored people for so long. Now the people in the schools, okay, we're going to take over and do this to you. But, I don't want to be part of that. I mean, that's one of the things as I've gotten older, just like one of the questions was how has my view of education changed me as a person over the years? And I think I've become much more tolerant. I used to be Mr. Unschooler, and I really get pissed off if people would say, oh yeah, unschooling's fine. We do that on the weekends with our kids. I just want to strangle them. It's so disrespectful and completely misunderstanding it, And yeah, but the person that, that says like, oh, I'll let my kids unschool, but not math. They have, okay. I've found my peace with people like that, and I have no problem with that. And even like a lot of conservative homeschoolers who literally want to do school at home, I appreciate where they're coming from. I'm not trying to convert anyone to unschooling. I don't even want to try to anymore to convert people to homeschooling in general, because it's such a big commitment. It's such a big change. If you don't want to do it, I feel like a con man trying to make you do it. I don't benefit from it. I'm not selling curricula or anything, but I mean, I care for the children, and I really believe that, a happy family a secure family will have happy and secure students, children who learn well. And so, try and find that instead of like the best, most expensive school and the toughest, most rigorous program. I mean, we do need like elite places for like great athletes and great, warriors and thinkers and whatnot. But not everyone has a small percent of the overall population. What's the rest of us supposed to do? So I would like to see this, and I think homeschooling is doing this because we're starting to see like maker spaces are popular. I'm going into another question, which is, well, I'm going to stop right now. I've just been going on and on. Ask me another question, I'll go on and on again.
All right. Well, this one leads into it. How will we grow more prominent in the mainstream and get more enthusiasm? I think you kind of alluded to it with, the maker spaces, but maybe you can tell us more. Because I think it would help if it was a stronger movement and people felt a sense of belonging to something and
Yes.
not like they're out there on their own so much.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's been one of the things. I mean, other than like anti-school, it's been hard to unite the group, and I'm against anti-compulsory schooling, but I mean, look, people have formed groups of people to share knowledge throughout tribal societies with the elders, all the way to, I mean, come on, it's perfectly okay to have like a class or a session or a workshop or something. I'm not saying I'm against that, but this idea that we can manufacture education in a person by following X number of steps over a number of years, that's what I disagree with. As I've seen it in my own life that, I didn't understand anything in school. John Holt, I mean, that's what got me. I don't know if Kristen was reading Teach Your Own, but when I first read Teach Your Own, I couldn't get into it. Made no sense to me. And then the office manager at Holt time, Peggy, she said, Pat, read his first book, How Children Fail. Basically that's the groundwork for all his thought. And it really is. He gets deeper and deeper into issues in subsequent books, but like, here's a teacher, fifth grade, private school, the most exclusive schools in Colorado and Massachusetts. And, he finally realized that, school is like a charade of learning. Everyone is careful to remember what they studied for the test until after the test is over. And then we all forget it, So, how do we make it more prominent and mainstream? So the first thing is, I think, is we have to find arguments that appeal broadly to shared sentiments, like family values, patriotism should also be included. But of course, those have been claimed by certain political parties. So that could be a difficult one. But then there's also childcare, healthcare, better wages, all of which make families more secure. So finding common ground with those sorts of groups, I think that we're a little too stuck in the education end of reform. And like if we could find, broaden out, like, like I said, like not like a parent teachers association where you're doing bake sales to support the school, but something where like the parents and the teachers talk about like, well, what can we do for the kids in our neighborhood, in this school? How can we, what sort of courses or clubs? I mean, and that's the other thing that I really think will help is if we can increase. I mean, one of the things that influences that homeschooling and unschooling in particular has is that it's showing other ways that children, in places where children can learn. The three big ones, John Holt always talked about public libraries. Summer camps is another one that's a great model. And then clubs, in Teach Your Own. John has a whole chapter. And I know that here in my house, I ran a stage and parlor magic club for 3 years. My wife ran a detective club. I taught music to kids. It's, there's a lot of ways to approach this, but how do we grow it? That's the thing. I mean, here I am now. I'm going to be 65 next month. And I wish I could say that homeschooling was bigger and more organized, but it's still like the lawyers for the right wing have their power, and everybody else is just like trying to figure out what we could do to spread the word and do our work. But I really think that we have to think a little bit bigger and like I said, some of these bigger issues. And also like family values and stuff. Like I said, I mean, it really annoys me when people try to claim that because every family has its values.
And that leads right into the next question, or what are some concrete steps that educators, and I would say, and parents can do to move it forward? You mentioned, I mean, 3 areas: public schools, or public libraries, and summer camps, and clubs, which
right.
are there. What are some things like this group could do or concrete steps to kind of move it forward?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm talking local. I mean, it's kind of hard when we have groups like this, but because we're all interested in this. But now the goal is we have to interest people who live near us in this. And that becomes a little harder. But I would say that, the organizing support, what I found over the years is that when homeschoolers and unschoolers get involved, and people don't even know that they're homeschoolers or unschoolers, and then they say, oh, you've been such a great help, and blah, blah, blah. And then they find out, oh, you don't, they say, what school do you go to? And then they find out they don't go to school. That's it. So the more I feel that homeschoolers and unschoolers could participate and actually organize their own groups that want to intersect with the public, as opposed to just, like when I ran the Stage of Magic Club, we would go out and perform. There's no point in doing magic if you can't perform it, So we would go to local old folks' homes and do shows, and for the YMCA sometimes. So, trying to get involved, integrated into the community more, because then, people see. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like a lot of homeschooling is invisible to people. I mean, they see. I know that, and this is probably still happening, but not as much, because I think homeschooling is a little more accepted than it was when I was raising our girls in the 80s and 90s. But my wife and I were often asked if the kids were with us shopping or just taking a hike or something. Why aren't you in school? And we'd have to give the whole spiel about homeschooling. So hopefully we'll see that get more normalized. I mean, just the fact that it's tripled in size, for years, it sort of normalized it a little bit for a percent of the population. But I really don't see how the school system as it is can continue without becoming more and more authoritarian and more draconian in its and its need to have bodies. I mean, that's the other thing. I think we should really consider changing the funding mechanism for schools. Instead of basing it on the number of students, it should be like the police department or the fire department. So this is a community resource that people, and I would like to see older people too, be able to use it. I know some people that would like to learn Spanish or take up math again, or try to fill up the blanks in some books that they never understood or read. Do you have a question, Kristen? Oh.
Sorry, I was just trying to figure out the chat. I just got messed up with my chat.
Okay, because I saw you waving your hand.
So I was like, oh, no, wait, whoops. Sorry.
Okay. So, yeah, one of the things that is always, and I'm working on a blog post about this right now, but so it's ill-formed in my mind. But right now, it's just like, there was a book we used to sell called Being Me and Also Us. And it was by Alison Stalabras. And she worked at a place called the Peckham Center in London. And in John's book, Instead of Education, he writes about this is how schools could be. And it's a fascinating story. The Peckham Center was started in the 1930s, shut down during World War II in London, and reopened and continued until the late 50s. And it was a health center run by doctors who were trying to figure out how what conditions maintain people's health. And so they were like supplying them with food, like they had a cafeteria there, they had a gymnasium, and clubs, lots of clubs, for dancing and stuff. And it was mainly aimed towards adults. But then the kids started to want to come in, and that's where Alison Salabras came in there, and she became the nurse. And she talks about, like, when you look at photos of the place, if you can find the book, it's really worthwhile. I mean, ropes courses inside the inside gym, and the kids are climbing, and everyone is doing something. And the cafeteria was arranged about 2 stories above the gym, so the elderly people having tea and crumpets could look down and talk about the kids and what they're doing down there. I mean, it was really interesting. And of course, the clubs had. The book name is Being Me and Also Us by Alison Stalabras. And so that's another really good model of what schools could be. But and again, that's been around for ages. This is why, like, I feel good about the overall direction we're going. But now that, like, Stanford and a bunch of these big universities are saying, oh, let's do away with standardized tests. I've been listening to that and saying, let's do a standardized test since 1977. You know? And I remember there was a wonderful book called None of the Above by David Owen of the New Yorker, a very respected writer. And that came out in the late 80s about like what a scam the SAT is and how what a waste of everyone's time and money, right? Here it is. It took, you know, and just as a brief aside, this memory popped into my head. I remember talking to John one time in the office about, you know, because there was some study that came out that showed kids, you know, can teach themselves much more than we thought, you know. And so I asked him, why don't people react to this? You know, why can't we get any movement on things like that? And John just said, you know, back in the 20s, I think it was, there was two theories about light, whether there were waves, I think, or molecules, you know. The current theory was that it was like molecules, I believe. And that theory held reign, even though more and more evidence was showing they're actually waves of light, you know, spectrums. And the only way that theory changed was when the elders who were controlling the textbooks and the courses at MIT and the other, you know, regimes of scientific education died. And then the new regime, the new people came up. So, I mean, you know, and I think there may be a lot of truth to that, you know, unfortunately, that, you know, people have a vested interest in keeping these things and these theories the way they are, even though they claim like, oh, we're scientists and in the light of new evidence, we'll change our opinions. Well, it takes a long, long time for those opinions to change in the light of any evidence. So that's why I'm saying slow but steady. It's not going to happen overnight unless the pandemic suddenly hits a new and horrible spread.
That's unfortunate, but I think you're probably pretty accurate. So I think you've been kind of talking about this, but how has your view of education changed you as a person over the years? I mean, how has it impacted you?
Well, yeah, it's impacted me a lot because, you know, I as a kid, I always questioned school. You know, I was one of those students that was able to get a decent grade without working hard, and then like I could do what I wanted. You know, this is get off my back, teacher. It's done. Here's your paper. You know. But then I went to a high school in the Bronx that was an alternative school. Well, they were trying to become an alternative school. They were actually a prep school, and they turned in during my freshman year. I think I was the second or third year that they had this experiment going on. And you got to choose your own courses, and you got to, you know, make your own schedule for the week and, you know, stuff like that. And so I got a taste of what it was like. And, you know, they claimed this was preparing me for college. And then I went to college. I was like, gee, I liked high school a lot better. You know? So I had a taste of alternative education. So I knew what else was out there. But I also saw my high school, when I was a junior, one of the seniors overdosed on heroin. And that was blamed by many parents and some of the school administrators on the liberal, you know, permissive program that they had at Fordham Prep. And so they did away with the Fordham Prep plan, as it was called. And oh yeah, the school's still there, Fordham Prep, but it's gone back to a completely conventional prep school, you know. And that's, you know, but I had a taste of it, and I don't think they, you know, I know some of the teachers there wanted it to succeed, but clearly, I mean, that's the sort of thing we face. And I'm sure that Monica and other people could tell you about many alternative schools and alternative programs within public schools that just get cut, you know, arbitrarily, you know, so yeah, so I was prepped to accept unschooling and homeschooling, but because of that, and I think that was a good change for me. You know, unschooling, you know, I had all the standard questions. How are they going to get in college? But it took me a year. But fortunately, you know, I had John Holt to talk to.
Yeah.
So like, you know, and I remember more than once telling me, Pat, have you ever read this? I said, no. I said, well, read that before you talk to me about this topic. You know? I mean, he'd had these arguments over and over. I mean, people don't realize that at one point he was called into Congress to testify in I think 68 or 69 about the student protests. And like, how could we make these students stop protesting, and why are they so dissatisfied with school? And I have not read those actual records, but there's a book called I think it's called Minding American Education, where the author did look at those, and he said it's really interesting to hear how like the congressmen are asking Holt all these general questions, and Holt just kept responding, "It depends on the child. Every child is different." And they just didn't, they didn't want to hear that, and that's the other big problem we face is like everyone wants to pull the levers, of the machinery, but no one wants to get one-on-one. We want to get one-on-one, but no, we're considered, no, if I pull the lever, then you got to do this. You got to pull with me. It's like, yeah, but this kid doesn't want to do that, or this kid would be better off having some time with so-and-so, or, doesn't matter. The lever is pulled. This has to happen. This run school run, and that's what I was saying earlier about, if only schools could be more flexible, agile, when it comes to working with children, but we're not seeing that. So yeah, I learned that things are going to change slowly, but and you have to be tolerant of everyone. You'll go crazy. I mean, I met some very angry school reformers in my lifetime too. Very upset. Herb Cole and Jonathan Kozol were both friends of John's, but when he started promoting homeschooling, they thought he was nuts and an enemy to the public school system. And so I also learned from those experiences, what we face. Progressives don't get unschooling any more than conservatives do, I've learned.
That's very fascinating. That's very fascinating that progressives don't get it any better than conservatives. I think we're all scared of what we don't understand. So
yes,
I just think when we don't understand something, then we don't like it because it's just too new. It's too different from what we know. So that kind of takes the next one. What for you? Because we were talking about it depends on kids. What were some of the best learning experiences you had with your children? That's a softball to you. I'm sending you.
I mean, we had, for me, like, I don't know. For me, we've had so many nice meals together. That's always been an important part with my Italian background. But for me personally, I was teaching my daughters piano. All three learned piano from me. And my wife taught me an important lesson through that. Who was it? It was my oldest daughter, Lauren. Lauren was very good at the piano and she got it all, but she decided she didn't want to do it anymore. And I made a fuss about because you're so talented. My wife took me aside and she said, "You keep making a big deal about this. She's not going to like music anymore. Just don't make a big deal about it." And I realized she was right. So I just dropped it, right? And sure enough, Lauren's picked up the guitar and she's a singer and she does that like for, she's not professionally or anything, but because, she likes it. And then my other daughter, Allison, she took the piano, then she dropped it, but she got into tap dancing. That was her way of addressing music. And then my daughter Audrey was a multi-instrumentalist. She started with the piano, moved to the drums and the bass and vocals. And and like me, we're all amateurs. We enjoy playing at home and with other people, friends and stuff. But that I'm so happy that I was able to share that, and that I didn't ruin it by forcing them to learn the piano. So that was one of my first, best learning experiences because I learned a lot too. And then the other things were travel. And I don't mean like, you had big travels, I mean, sometimes, just going an hour away to a state park or something. We had some wonderful canoe trips. And I mean, people forget, like, you don't have to spend a ton of money, I mean, in Massachusetts, I think you paid $40 and you get access to every state park and includes your parking. And there you go, for a whole year. You know, you can take the whole family to a state park and do something like that. Those are really good. And then what was the other one I wrote down? Oh yeah, watching musicals. We all love, you know, we all love dance. All three of my daughters got into dance, either ballet or tap, different times of their life. And but we always enjoyed watching, you know, the classic musicals and the cartoon musicals and all that stuff. And then my kids would make their own movies. Oh yeah, Hamilton was, yeah. I mean, now we're all a lot older, yeah, and that to me was fascinating. They would be so inspired by watching, you know, the dancing and singing and just the enjoyment and joy that they got out of a musical. And they wanted to make a musical. And they made movies. We still have them on videotape. Some of them, you know, I hope we can watch. But you know, that to me was amazing. And you know, you could see the early stages of writing. It was like they were trying to write title cards and organize it, you know, because they didn't have iMovie or anything back then. You know, we just had a video camera, so they had to do everything sequentially. You know, there's no editing, you know. And that to me was fascinating. So yeah, and those are treasures to me. You know, I mean, I remember, you know, finding a macaroni necklace in my mother's drawer one day. She said that's one of us, you know, my brothers made for her. Well, finding those videotapes was like that macaroni necklace to me. It was like, oh gosh, yeah, you know. Finished that movie, and then the next thing you know, they were running around looking for the video camera. Let's go do something.
Oh, that's awesome. Those are precious memories, right? And we have
Absolutely.
those ads of VHS types we need to do something with too. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that we're still going to be able to watch them from that same era that you're talking about. We were just talking about that the other day, like, oh my gosh, what will we
Yeah.
do with that? So these questions were very good. And actually they came out of our last meeting, and then I got a few DMs, but the ones I've talked about so far were people who came last month and wanted to ask these questions. So what do you think are the most significant benefits to your children of being homeschooled?
Well,
Or
I can
unschooled?
think of, yeah, I can think,
So many, you have to
I'm
think
trying
hard.
to, well, yeah, I mean, I guess the main thing is that they develop intrinsic motivation. You know, that was not quashed. You know, the idea that you can create a lemonade stand and go out and sell lemonade to the neighbors. You know, they were, you know, my daughter Audrey, the youngest one, was always, she had Audrey Snappy Snacks. You know, she was always like taking bags of chips and stuff and selling them. So, you know, it's the intrinsic motivation, and also the ability to participate in society with adults. You know, I mean, I think that that's a big mistake that we've made. You know, I mean, certainly children need to be around other children and not have adults hovering over them all the time. So don't get me wrong there. But the idea that children should be seen and not heard is very modern. You know, it's like, you know, you read history books, you just look at history or think about it. Children are part of adult society. They saw everything. They were there. And in modern society, they're segregated. And so I think one of the things that we do with our children is that we acclimate them to being around adults in different ages. And that has a significant benefit. I remember speaking at a conference in California, and a mom told me that, you know, and her daughters were both accomplished young teenagers. And, you know, she said, you know, I complimented her on her kids, and she says, oh, they're not as smart as everyone says they are. They just have good manners because they know how to talk with adults. You know, and I was like, that always stuck with me. It's just like, gee, you know, because it's true. Like you can even meet like a 14 or a 15-year-old boy or girl, and sometimes like they look away, they don't want to talk to you. But I've heard more than once over my 40 years, oh, the big difference with a homeschool teenager is they look you in the eye when they talk to you. They engage you. They're not scared of being around adults. And that to me is very important, you know. You know, if you have the moxie to stand up to someone who's twice your size and present your case, good for you. You should be encouraged to do that instead of, knocked. So, and that's what my wife and I did. We encouraged our girls to speak up and to get involved and do stuff. And yeah, sometimes there were embarrassing things where they may have been a little too extreme in their enthusiasms, but that comes with the turf. You can roll with it.
Yeah, we've seen that too, Pat. My daughter was in drama, and when there were kids from school and unschoolers and was that Clonlar, the YAG thing did there, but we were just always amazed. It was the kids who were homeschooled that jumped into cleanup. They were the kids who jumped in to ask questions, to get things organized.
Right.
My daughter would go, okay, we need to get started here. We only have so much time. It was very aware that waiting for these two adults who were talking about something important, just sitting there waiting was a waste of everybody's time. But the kids in school, just wait. Just wait to be told. So yeah,
that was something.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I finished, Monica. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that I think that when you that intrinsic motivation, that initiative, I think they really lack initiative. They don't know how to get started anymore because they're always waiting to be told what to do.
That's right.
And also being able to put themselves in someone else's shoes. I noticed that there was a higher degree of empathy because they were in more mixed groups.
Right.
There were much more mixed groups too, but it's that whole socialization thing is just such a myth.
It is. And we don't learn socialization just by being around people the same age as us. That's not, that's not the way it is in any society.
Yeah. So I do think this is amazing. So I want to make sure I keep getting to these questions here. So I think we just kind of hit this one though. What are the things to look for in children that show what we're doing is better than the current conventional school system? I think we hit on a couple of them as initiative, intrinsic motivation.
Right. Well,
any other ones?
Happiness. Joy. I'll never forget. It was a conference in Northern California where I met Thomas Armstrong. They had him there 2 or 3 times as a speaker, and I met him twice there. And I had him as a speaker at a Holt conference actually. And Tom Armstrong said, and this is like the late 90s. But I in the most recent edition of Teach Your Own, I followed up on this, and it hasn't changed much. If you look through the literature of education research and use keywords joy in learning, you're not going to find much. In fact, there was an article in Education Week, I think I quoted it in the latest edition of Teach Your Own, where like a Finnish study did that, and they said children in their study, children don't like being lectured to. That's the least favorite way of engaging with adults. And yet, what do? No joy in the classroom, but we have joy. You could see it. What joy is when your children display it, when you have it, but it is kind of sad that there's no joy in the classroom, and there should be more. There could be more, this is the thing, this is why John said teach your own. It wasn't, he just gave up on the fact that schools would change, that they just become too technocratic. And gosh, I'm looking at stuff in my files. We just put in new floors. And so I've got boxes and boxes of stuff I'm trying to get rid of and go through. And I found some stuff from the early 80s where computer companies were working with the federal government, invited John down to participate in some sort of seminar. And he didn't do it. But back then, business and government, we're always working. It's always like, we can control everybody somehow. We can make all this work with this big machine. Instead of, no, what about taking it down on the local level and give the power to the local people as much as you can, But, and I think that, this has come up a couple of times today. People don't feel that they're trained as teachers. They don't feel adequate to do it. But here's the thing. If when my daughter wanted to learn Spanish, I didn't know even though I have 4 years of Spanish and passed it, I can't speak it or use it, although I'd like to now. See, now I have the motivation as an older person, but back in school, and they said you had to learn it, I didn't. But anyway, I'm kind of ranting here.
Oh, that's awesome. And this, that leads into what are your tips on getting started with teaching your own? And I think how that's changed. And I think that ties into a question that Laura put in here about handling the objections of parents being incapable because they're uneducated. So I think that kind of, those two questions kind of go together. Tips on getting started and then overcoming those objections that you're not educated enough, right?
Well, one of the things, tips about getting started that has changed since I wrote Teach Your Own. First of all, in 1981, when Teach Your Own came out, the first 3 chapters were all about the law. And then there was a whole big section which I edited down, but decided to keep because I feel it is important to have something about the law in there that people understand, what your rights are, and you do have the right to teach your child at home. That's not up for debate. It's just how much, how long and stuff like that may be the question. But so I would say that I talk a heck of a lot less about how to work with the law. And the other thing is, unschooling has become more acceptable to a degree. For decades, you could look this up in GWS and in our catalog. We had ways of explaining unschooling by just turning it into education jargon. So if your kids like to play chess, we would say they're doing strategic thinking. If they like to read Hardy Boys mysteries or Twilight or Harry Potter, we'd say they did 2 hours of silent sustained reading, uninterrupted silent sustained reading. But now I pulled together a pamphlet called "How to Report Unschooling to School Officials," and there are actual these are actual documents that people have been sending in, and they just say, "Oh yeah, our kids play. They put on this play. They did this." They're just talking about what's going on. And I know that some school officials, I wrote for a little bit for, oh gosh, I can't remember the website, but it was an educator's website, and they didn't like what I had to say because I wasn't all on board with the constant measurement of learning, which is, so I mean, really, they measure reading, 5th grade, 3rd month. I've done consultations with parents who are worried that their children are reading at a 6th grade first month level, and they should really be in a 6th grade 6th month level. It's wow, but school makes people, and society. I mean, this whole idea that only a very few can reach to the top and everyone else is going to be poor. We kind of see that. I mean, that's unfortunately becoming true, just the way society's been structured. But now we're even realizing that you can go to college and not make money. One of the things that was eye-opening to me was I'd always known that college, not everyone needs a college degree. After I finished college, I wound up working in a department store, then a bookstore before I wound up at Holt Associates. I didn't, my master's degree in English wasn't necessary for that. And if you look at the Federal Reserve Bank numbers for, I think it was 2021, you'll see 43% of college graduates are underemployed, meaning a high school graduate can do that work. 43%. I mean, that's but we as a society keep saying, oh yeah, how many more retail clerks with master's degrees do we need? I mean, it's and not to mention the expense and then the bitterness that people have. I know, my daughter, Lauren, I wrote about this in Teach Your Own. She got her degree in social work, or MSW, from University of San Diego, and worked for 5 years in Houston and Massachusetts as a social worker. Got completely burned out, and the thing that kept her going was yoga. So she's now running a yoga studio, but she's stuck with $60,000 in debt to the University of San Diego. But this is modern society. This is the way education is. And that's another thing. let our, especially teenagers, let them try as many things, apprentice, internships, whatever. It's okay. They can go to college when they're 21 if they got to go to college. They could go when they're 30. And if you're lucky enough to have a community college that lets high school students enroll, they can go as young as 14. I remember in California, at least in the 80s, if you were 14, you could go to a community college. I know they've changed that, but I mean, that's how education should be. It should be open and inviting to as many people as possible, instead of exclusive and walled off from the rest of society.
Monica, you're on mute.
I am on mute, and I've also lost my questions. So go ahead, Pat, to the next question, because I just lost my questions here.
Does anybody have questions in the audience?
Yeah, we have some in here.
There was a question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
There was a question in the chat about what agile meant to you.
To me, agile means flexible. That you're not going to be stuck to the written curriculum. If we're talking about agile learning, which I assume we are. And I like the agile learning centers that I'm familiar with. They said they but like anything, they're hard to sell, because people don't trust that children would learn in a flexible environment. And again, part of me just wonders, like, what is it about gosh, Monica, you might remember this book, the Dominator paradigm. What was that? The Chalice and the Blade, I think.
Yeah, Rianne Eisler, yes.
Rianne Eisler, yeah.
Yes, she did partnership education, and then she did.
Yeah.
And boy, I know I tried to get people to do that, and they were just like, couldn't see it.
Yeah, it's got to be the dominant way. There's got to be a leader.
Yeah.
It's like
very patriarchal.
Yeah, very patriarchal. Absolutely, yeah. And that's ironic, because in homeschooling in particular, it's the moms that are leading the way, and always has been.
and that trusting piece is just huge. But Rianne Eisler was talking about this in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And she's still alive. She's still doing her thing.
Oh,
but
good.
I read her partnership education, and then Tomorrow's Children. That was the other one, Tomorrow's Children. And it's very similar to John Holt. I mean, when you look at it, then I became involved with Brent Cameron, same thing, just looking at just trusting children, trusting that the learning process, but we're so focused on the outcome, the end product, that it's really, really hard to shift that paradigm. It's a huge paradigm shift.
Yeah, it is. It looks
like Carrie's got a question.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, hi, Carrie.
Okay, great. Hi. I had 5 questions. You answered 4 of them.
Wow.
I first wanted to say thank you. I have scoured the internet, and I look for anything you've written or talked about, from podcast to everything, and just keep doing it.
Thank you.
It's really wonderful and helpful to me, and I know a lot of other families. Let me see. I had one thing I wanted to say, and then one question. One thing is about just a concern about right now that I thought of when you guys were talking about COVID and everything. The thing that I'm scared for the kids right now is, even though, we know, even though if they took 2 years off of school, they're fine. They're learning, they're always learning. But these poor kids are now being told that they are behind. They're 2 years behind. They're never going to catch up. They're never going to go to college. They're never going to make anything of themselves, because they, in kindergarten, didn't go to school for 2 years. And I just want to say, I'm worried what the future is going to look like for those kids who have just been told they are so far behind now.
That's right.
Which is
That's
heartbreaking.
Right.
And let me see. Then I did have a question. I said you answered it. So I guess it's more about how to sort of make this a little more mainstream. And that's what I've been trying to do with homeschooling families here in Louisville. And just for a few years, I've been hosting unschoolish meetups, which meant I don't care how you're homeschooling, but when you come to the meetups, it's going to be run unschooly, which means, if the kids want to just sit and hang out, they don't have to do anything, but we can offer stuff for them to do and just come and play. And it's gone over great, and it's continued to grow. COVID hit, we stopped for 2 years, and I'm so excited to start back up because I miss everybody. But I'm wanting to take it a step further, and we're kind of organizing as a nonprofit board and all that awfulness. But one of the things that I want to offer for the homeschoolers is because, like you were saying, oh, we unschool except for math and things like that. I know when I started, I was terrified because my son dropped out of kindergarten. And I was like, oh no, we've got it. I had no clue about anything. I mean, I've done 5 years of research. Now I know what I'm doing, I think. But that I honestly worried the state was going to come and take my kids away if I wasn't doing Wednesday's math homework with my kid. So of course, now I've learned the laws in Kentucky. What I would love to offer, and I don't know how to go about doing this, is to maybe do a Zoom like this or something similar, a video or something, where somebody from the Kentucky Department of Education, which I wonder if they'd even be willing, would be able to pretty much say openly that, yes, unschooling in Kentucky is legal and is possible. Here's how that is. Like, because most of the talk parents are like, oh, but in the Kentucky law, it says you must teach math, this, and this. And I try to help and guide people like, well, first of all, they don't come checking. In Kentucky, you just have to send in your letter of intent and keep attendance, because we're considered private schools, although not as far as California does, from my understanding. But I just want to be able to show the parents that were like me, that were like, no, but, because when you read this legal stuff, it makes you think you have to do it this way. Because I have people come into my group saying, oh, it says we have to do civics. How do I do civics with my first grader? I need to hurry up and get I'm like, but just look back on the week and make a note of what, and then you don't even have to. So I was wondering, is there a person, or like, who could I get together? Part of me keeps thinking of Gina Riley. Just to kind of back up the fact that what it says we have to do, unschooling checks those boxes. Legally, you're following the law by doing this. And I guess that's my question.
Well, and it's a good question, because it comes up a lot, but it is answerable, and that is, you're doing education, as the British term it, education otherwise. You're not doing it the school way. Yes, you have to teach those subjects, but they can't tell you the order and so on. So just like you said, my children learned civics. Well, we participated in the local fund drive for Kiwanis, the other day, and you save that, like a newspaper clipping or a photo of them collecting money from a car or something like that with a Kiwanis thing. You can prove those things. You don't have to do it the school way, as you said. And I think that parents have to see that. And also the time is on your side, because you're in charge of your school. In a Waldorf school, they don't teach the children to read until their eye teeth fall out, right? Okay. But in American public school, we do it in 3rd grade, because after that, the whole curriculum is based on reading. So you're pretty much dead meat if you're not reading by the end of 3rd grade in most American public schools. And interestingly enough, I've learned from the homeschoolers in France that the way they teach reading in France is through dictation. And so everyone has it, and so they're like in a panic about their children taking good dictation. So everyone has different ways of approaching this, including different countries. So just take them as general guides. And as a friend of mine in Denmark was saying that because he and his wife finally got comfortable with unschooling, But the Danish schools are pretty flexible. Although the reason they're unschooling now is because they're becoming more American. They're doing more standardized tests and stuff. But he said when their oldest child was in school, she's now in her 20s, I believe, she wasn't reading, and he complained to the teachers like she's in third grade and she's not reading yet. And I only wish more teachers had this attitude. They said, no one graduates from this school without learning to read. Just have some patience. I mean, gosh, that was so refreshing to me to hear that. Because most teachers, oh yeah, we have to do get the remediation, and you're gonna have to pay for an extra course on the weekend. So it's like, oh no, relax, and that's just it. We want everything to be like a factory. It's got to happen at this time, and that's not how it is. And again, one of the things that John taught me, you read Never Too Late. It's about learning to play the cello when he was a middle-aged man. I mean, it's never too late to learn. And when I was working on this new edition of Teach Your Own, I was struck how many elderly people in their 70s to 90s are contributing to science and society in general. It's like, and then also young people. I mean, we shouldn't be keeping them locked up in school all the time. I understand that a lot of parents want that, but that's okay. They can have that. And maybe sometimes I know as an unschooler, sometimes you illness or something like that, you need some support and help, or you're having a difficult time and school's the only option. But this to me goes back to the first thing. What's the future of homeschooling? I really, really hope, and I talked about this in my video that you can see on the Holt YouTube site. But I learned that education literally is childcare. The Latin root is educare. It means to nourish, to breastfeed. And that's why. The man who taught me this was a Catholic priest, and he was saying that his name was Ivan Illich, and he was noting that in the Middle Ages you could see statues of the abbots of monasteries that are presented as having breasts, but that's the milk of knowledge, and it's supposed to. So this whole idea of teaching and learning comes from a point of nurturing, a point of repose, of calmness, and instead we've turned it into like this mad rush to get degrees, and the earlier the better. And if you're smart, we better like put you in a super advanced program as soon as possible. And it's just like, well, wait a minute, what's the rush? People are making big discoveries about battery power and stuff in their 90s, and there was a time where young people, like I think they said, like most men and women under 30 made their biggest scientific discoveries. But that turned out to be a blip, that if, just be in the 20th century. But if you spread it out into the 21st century, they're finding that, because we're living longer,
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I have to say, your story just brings up a memory for me of one of my kids taught himself to read sometime between 2 and 3.5. We're not quite sure when, but all of a sudden he was reading. So we sent him to kindergarten because he wanted to be in the new neighborhood. And the teacher, lovely woman, she said, "I'm so sorry. I know I'm not working with Chris enough. The only time I have to work with him would be at recess. And I could work with him on his reading and math." I go, no, please don't. I want him to read recess, his favorite part of the day.
Exactly.
She was so, she meant it very, very, and she's, "Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad. I wish more parents would say that." But I didn't want you to think I didn't know. And then I had my other daughter who wanted to go to kindergarten or first grade in the neighborhood because we moved when she was little. She went. And she's the third child. The teacher didn't even know she knew how to read in November. She called me and was mad. She was mad that I didn't tell her that my daughter knew how to read. But Carolyn would come home by Tuesday and have her entire weekend planned, the list made out, the phone numbers, who to call, where to go. I'm like, it's Tuesday. I need some time. I need some time. You know what I'm saying? There's this sense, I think, that the learning isn't as important as getting the grade or keeping up.
Mhm.
And that's so hard on our children. And we were talking about people being behind. I think that really is tragic. That's
Yeah.
really tragic, because it
Yeah.
really doesn't matter when you're an adult, when
Mhm.
they're homeschooled, when they learn to read.
Right.
But in school, that statistic is still out there. 75% of the kids who don't learn to read by third grade don't graduate. But that's because the system is set up that way,
Right.
not
It's
because-
man-made, completely man-made. Has nothing to do
Yeah.
with biology or
No.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the piece. I think somebody was asking, how do we do it with our kids? I said that's something, if you can start young, that my mom only cares if I learn something. And it comes from when they get their photo taken, the photographer says to my kid's got, stuff all over his shirt. My mom won't care. I've got a baseball. My mom won't care. They call me. I told you my mom wouldn't care. And then when they're older, that, one of my kids, I weren't going to give him an A because he used a graphing calculator on something. And he was going part-time to school. And they called me in and I said, you know what? I don't care. My mom's going to say she doesn't care. She's just going to ask me if I learned anything. And that piece of us being more interested in their learning than in their proving.
Following the rules.
Following the rules. Oh yeah, the best part was when they wanted him to give them his program and he deleted it. And they said, aren't you going to punish him? And I said, for what? The sign says, return the calculator in the condition. But you got it. So he programmed it and he did the test, but he didn't show his work, obviously, because it was all in the calculator. But he wrote the program. He came in, wrote the program, did it. But it's so, and the guy the teacher actually apologized. He said, it's the math department, Monica. It's the math department. They're making me do this. And I said, I'm thinking, I like you too. However, you need to get a backbone a bit, right?
Yeah, right. But
So,
again,
yeah,
it's hard to make anyone understand what you're trying to say when their paycheck depends on it.
Yeah. And this is
Mhm.
25 years ago now, okay? 'Cause my kids are also grown up too.
Mhm.
But you know what? It hasn't changed. I have a friend whose kid was sick in school and they were saying if he couldn't come to take the test that they were going to fail him. I'm like, we wouldn't do that to our
What?
puppies. Yeah. He was sick.
Yeah.
I said, this is craziness.
Yeah.
Well, if he doesn't take it by June, blah, 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 he can't get it. I said, they're incompletes. I mean, really, would you take your dog and make your dog do a dog show when your dog is sick? No, you wouldn't do that. Don't do it to your kids. But this was only maybe 7 years ago, 6 years
Yeah.
ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
I
like
know.
I said,
Schools have not changed very much. I mean, goodness, I mean, they're just barely getting up with the computer revolution, and yeah, and my gosh, I really hope that that we're not going to have school in the metaverse. That's
oh, I know. I think this is the piece. There's so many opportunities, but we were talking, how do you get the word out? How do you get the word out to people in a way that they can hear it? Like, 'cause I mean, we're on the other side, so it's a lot easier for us to look back and say, yeah, it worked. There were certainly glitches. I'm not going to say there weren't glitches, and there weren't times that I got up in the middle of the night and said, oh my God, what do we do? But I still remember asking you, I go, how far do you go with unschooling? And you said, until you can't sleep. What we worry about changes as we get older too, right? So we're different people in different decades and things like that. So yes, so we really so appreciate you doing this. Has been so awesome. And somebody said they'd love to talk with me. I said, anytime, Kristen, I'm happy to chat. Just chat me up. But I think this is a good conversation. And it's one that's so important to have, is taking charge of your education on your own, and empowering people to feel they can do that. So we do want to honor your time, but if there are other questions, if we sent them to you, would you respond to our questions?
Yeah, I can respond through email. Yeah.
Okay, because we have a chat, and I think I invited you to the group, so I'll just ping you if anything comes in.
Don't assume I know how that works. So,
okay, all right, okay, no worries.
Talk me through it and I'll participate.
No, we love it. No, I think people need to hear from people like you that who've written, who knew John Holt, because now he's an icon. But you knew him, Pat Montgomery knew him, I knew of him because he was already gone when I started. But it's so important, it's so important. And now there are other people we need to have other people take over, because we're, where we are, I'm your age. We need other people like you, Kristen, and Evelyn and Emily and the other, all of you, Laura, Monica, Carrie, we need all of you to take this forward, because that's the next generation of leaders.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I helped found the Alliance for Self-Directed Education.
Yeah, right.
Get as much new blood in there. I mean, we're grandparents now.
Yeah, right. And Arrow, Alliance for Self-Directed Education. There's a couple other ones too. I'm just blanking on them right now, but I think it's just so important to join these groups, support them, because they're the net. That's where you're going to find your people, right?
Share them with whoever, whoever is willing to listen.
Right.
Thank you so much. So
well,
I do want to honor you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would just, given what you just said, you reminded me, I mean, the best advertisement for homeschooling and unschooling is to be involved in your community so that people see your children. Because when they see kids doing things, they ask questions. And there's your opportunity, to lead into homeschooling, unschooling. And then they're going to say, well, I could never do that. They always do. That's always the first response. But now they're impressed. But now you sort of rocked it a little. So being involved and getting out into the world is really, really important, I think, for right now at this stage, especially during the pandemic. Like I said, I mean, they're going to keep kids locked up in front of remote learning computers and in schools. It's like, come on, you've got playgrounds, you've got gyms, you've got forests, you've got cities, and you have teachers and faculty and school buses. Why can't we just shift for this time? But no, because then the factory schedule gets upset, and that's it. We're viewing children as widgets instead of people.
I just say it's so true. So I just think it's so. And I was just looking for Arrow. Always has the weirdest website. Here it goes. Educationrevolution.org. I don't know why they don't just have Arrow, but they don't. It's okay. I'll just put
right.
I think,
in the chat, Monica.
Oh, you did. Thank you so much. Carrie did. Thank you so much. Yeah, those are just two. I know there are other organizations too. Pat, one last thing you were going to talk about, and if you need to leave, we certainly understand. You were talking about you've been invited to talk with some charter schools.
Sure. I mean, I've been invited to talk to one, but it's a system. They have 5 schools. I think it's called Compass Charters in California, and they have want me to address unschooling for their faculty to try and describe it, because they're getting so many people who want to do unschooling in their program, and that was pretty interesting to me, because that's the first time in my since 1981, when I started at Holt Associates, that a public school has contacted me about how can we work with unschoolers instead of how do we get rid of them.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it is shifting, but I think until that funding model isn't butts and seats, I think it's going to be really hard, right?
That's
and
right.
we have to
would vary. Like I know in Nevada, the law is if you call yourself a school, which would be any charter school, they have to follow the state standards. So well, how do you get around that? And so I've been very careful with my program to not call it a school. We don't have students, we have learners. We don't have teachers, we have facilitators. So right. It's all, and it took the city a year to give me my license because they didn't know where to put me. So
yeah, so much. Yeah. So we wish you the best of luck there, because I know it's very, very hard to shift that paradigm that learning's happening, even if I can't see it.
Mhm.
You know, it doesn't fit a little box that I've got to check, off, right?
Right.
Yeah, we'll check that box off. Yeah, I think that's kind of the hard part, is that box checking, ticking the boxes all the time becomes an overwhelming kind of thing. And
Mhm.
so that's so awesome. But anyway, I wish you the best of luck there. I will check in to see how that one goes, because we tried, when I was with Self-Design,
Yeah.
we looked at opening what we thought was going to be a center or a school and get some funding. And we actually got the federal grant for it, but couldn't make headway with the state.
Hmm.
So we had a big $500,000 grant from the
Wow.
federal government, but we couldn't make headway with the state to let go of the testing, the testing requirements. So it was really kind of unfortunate. So that was 20, not quite 20 years ago, maybe like 15.
Yeah, that's a shame. You would think that, you could use alternative assessments. I mean, it doesn't have to be, the standardized test model, but
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
yeah, it was complicated, but yeah, we got to where you are talking to people, and that's kind of where it ended.
Yeah, well, it's been my experience. Homeschooling and schooling just keeps growing, slowly but surely, because it works. People realize, I don't have to spend as much time and money and worry and aggravation dealing with a child who is not happy in school.
There you go.
We have options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like the Carrie said
All
she's
right.
on the way to be a school or a daycare. It gets yucky. Yeah, and daycare have their own. I was on the daycare commission here in the state of Michigan a couple decades ago now, and it opened my eyes that my idea of daycare was during the day, and I forgot about the people who work at night. And so it's still a huge issue. Caring for children is just a huge issue, because there are people who work at night. Nurses work at night.
Sure.
Other people, and in my small world at the time, I just hadn't come across that, and so childcare in general is huge in our country, and we don't have a good
And again, maybe that's one of those big broad issues that we can unite on with, and let people realize that homeschoolers and unschoolers are concerned about the same issues you're concerned about. We share this. I mean, childcare is vital.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, thank you so
right.
much.
My pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation and speaking and learning about what you guys are up to, and I hope to see you all again sometime.
Yeah. I definitely want to see you again. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Have a good day.
My pleasure. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Super. I hope it was helpful to you guys. Helen, we didn't get a chance to introduce you, or whoever, Priscilla or somebody on the phone, but we really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, I told, actually, I'm going to stop the recording right now.
Okay, that sounds good.